probably just as well.
This hearing will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Good afternoon, and welcome to this hearing of the Subcommittee on Research and Technology to review opportunities and challenges for the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer programs. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished panel of witnesses. We look forward to hearing your testimony and to having this discussion this afternoon. Today we are going to explore the role of these important programs in catalyzing the innovation and commercialization accomplishments from our federal research investments to generate new economic growth and further American leadership in innovation. The SBIR and STTR programs have helped entrepreneurs in my home state of Michigan to pursue their big ideas and contribute to our thriving innovation economy. Since the creation of these programs, small businesses, as an example in Michigan, have been able to leverage $1.2 billion in funds to develop an amazing array of new technologies while creating jobs and driving economic growth in our region. These investments transform communities and competitively grow small businesses. For instance, Variation Reduction Solutions Incorporated, VRSI, is a small business located in my district in Plymouth, Michigan, and they're focused on manufacturing production technology. With our great roots in southeastern Michigan in the auto industry, we needed to kind of find a way to continue to grow our economy as we were coming out of the Great Recession that began in Michigan in 2007. So with the help of an SBIR grant, VRSI expanded into the aerospace industry. See, this is the plight of diversification, right? So we love our auto industry, but if there's a downturn, we want to be able to sell into other industries as well. And so they became involved with the F-35 program and generated relationships with the Department of Defense and large industry players such as Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. The SBIR program was an essential piece of this successful transition to allow VRSI to not only weather through the transition of the Great Recession, but also to grow into a stronger and more thriving business. Today, SBIR programs continue to allow small businesses in my district with the opportunity to scale into new industries and new markets while building critical relationships with government and industry partners. It's because of successes like these that I am so proud to co-sponsor a bipartisan bill, and we did this earlier this Congress. I did this with my friend, Ranking Member Baird, and two of our colleagues on the other committee, on the House Small Business Committee, to further strengthen SBIR and STTR programs. HR 3774, the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Improvement Act of 2019, encourages agencies to give high priority to funding small manufacturers and cybersecurity firms, right? These are places where we need and want to innovate. And it's absolutely critical for our economic and national security for the U.S. to maintain a domestic manufacturing base and to develop the best cybersecurity tools for all businesses. For these entrepreneurs who are just getting started, early stage funding, right, helps them to get on the path for success. So this legislation, HR 3774, would require the Phase 0 Proof of Concept pilot program currently carried out by NIH to be expanded to NSF, DOE, and NASA. This pilot program has been instrumental in providing funds to innovators to identify research with commercial potential, engage in entrepreneurial training, and make technical validations. What could be greater? Phase Zero awards also allow researchers to take these important steps before company formation and before spending weeks to months to complete an SBIR application. Data from the NIH pilot program have clearly demonstrated the potential for this program to improve the overall outcomes of the SBIR program. Phase Zero efforts have also demonstrated success in broadening the participation of women and minorities in entrepreneurship, which is an important goal of the SBIR program that the agencies have long grappled with. SBIR has also been an important program in our overall federal R&D portfolio. It helps the agencies achieve their missions, and it supports innovative entrepreneurs who are creating jobs and generating economic growth in communities across the nation. The improvements to the SBIR program proposed in H.R. 3774 will ensure that we can continue to build upon the program's successes and lessons learned. I cannot think of a more essential and exciting topic for us to explore and learn more about today. I want to thank our witnesses again for being here. We are really looking forward to your feedback on the legislation and any other additional ideas that Congress should consider for improving the SBIR program. Before I recognize Dr. Baird for his opening remarks, I would like to present for the record statement from the National Institutes of Health and Energy Business Network regarding this hearing. So we have statements from both of these organizations for the official record today. And now, without further ado, our chair is going to recognize Dr. Baird for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stevens. Excuse me, I don't know why was that.
You can call me Doc.
Doc, okay.
You're Doc.
Anyway, let's not get confused here. I really appreciate you holding this hearing. And, you know, I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you to introduce that H.R. 3774. And, you know, these are, you know, descriptive terms, I guess, but when you talk about small business innovation research, if you really think through that, that's extremely important. And then you add to it the fact that small business technology transfer improvements, I mean, that's so important to our economy, to our country, and to our citizenship. So we really appreciate the opportunity to do that with you, and I appreciate all the witnesses being here. I'm really proud of America for our leadership in science and technology over the years and through the centuries. And as I mentioned, it is critical to our economy, and it's critical to our national security. And so basic research supported with taxpayer dollars through the National Science Foundation, through NASA, NIH, DOD, and other federal agencies have led to key scientific discoveries that have created today's world: the internet, wireless communications, life-saving medicines, lasers, and so on. So when you think about the products and innovations that have evolved from this kind of research, it's phenomenal. So basic research produces a scientific fuel for innovation. Risk-taking small businesses are the engines for converting that knowledge and new products into new products and services. Small businesses are the catalyst for economic growth, for producing good-paying jobs in our communities. So I think a lot of us recognize how important small businesses are to our communities and to our states and to the country. So SBIR and STTR programs help accelerate the commercialization of taxpayer-funded research into new products and services. They also help the Department of Defense and other federal agencies meet their research and development needs. The SBIR and STTR programs are funded from set-asides of the extramural research budget at federal agencies to the tune of 3.2% for SBIR grants and just less than 0.5% for the STTR. These set-asides sound small, but they amount to about $2.7 billion for SBIR and $368 million for STTR on an annual basis. So this is a huge taxpayer investment, so it's important that Congress that we ensure that these programs are working, and I think that's why we have these kinds of hearings to share with us as Congress members how the programs are working. My legislation takes steps to improve the accountability portion of that. First, it reinforces the requirement that Small Business Association give a comprehensive annual report to SBIR and STTR programs to Congress and hold the Department of Defense accountable to stimulate technological innovation. The bill also sets priorities for SBIR and STTR. Boy, as many times as I've said that, I hope you got those two acronyms down anyway. Programs to stimulate manufacturing and cybersecurity and the products and services that we utilize in the United States. The bill extends the flexibility given to agencies for innovative funding mechanisms for those two programs. Congress acted to extend those two programs through fiscal year 2022, but our work must continue to ensure the success of these programs. They are vital to helping the Hoosier small businesses and the other segments of our nation. I'm proud to have one of those Hoosier success stories on the panel here today. Dr. Johnny Park took basic research he developed in his lab at Purdue University. Did you hear that? Is Purdue University?
Okay,
anyway, and started a company with the assistance of an SBIR award to develop his research. Then he created products for farmers and a thriving business that has been acquired since then. I look forward to hearing his testimony today as a great example of the innovation system in America. We must take every opportunity to strengthen investment in R&D so that we can continue breaking boundaries and moving our economy forward. I'm proud to work with our colleagues to encourage innovation and give our businesses the resources they need to thrive. I look forward to hearing ideas from our panel and witnesses on how they can continue, or we can continue, to strengthen the two programs. And I yield back. Thank you.
If there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. And at this time, I'd also like to introduce our witnesses in full. Our first witness is Dr. Dawn Tilbury. Dr. Tilbury is the Assistant Director of the Directorate of Engineering at the National Science Foundation. In this role, she leads the Directorate in its mission to support engineering research and education critical to the nation's future. The Engineering Directorate also manages the National Science Foundation's SBIR and STTR programs. Dr. Tilbury is on temporary leave, wait for it, from the University of Michigan, where she has been a professor since 1995 in both mechanical and electrical engineering. She is also the inaugural chair of the Robotics Steering Committee and served as an associate dean for research in the College of Engineering at the University of Michigan. And as we just launched last week, the Women in STEM Caucus, for the House of Representatives. We look forward to engaging you in that caucus as well, in that committee. And then our next witness is Dr. Maryann Feldman. Dr. Feldman is the Distinguished Professor in the Department of Public Policy and Adjunct Professor of Finance in the Kenan-Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Her research focuses on the geography of innovation, the commercialization of academic research, and the factors that promote technological change and economic growth. Dr. Feldman is also the co-chair of several assessments of the SBIR and STTR programs that are underway at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And we're counting you in our Women in STEM Caucus, too. We're promoting it since we just launched it. And then next, and we're so delighted to have Mr. Nicholas Cucinelli. Mr. Cucinelli is the Chief Executive Officer of Endectra, LLC, an SBIR-funded spin-out from the University of Michigan, launched in 2015, that has a portfolio of photonic and nanosensor technologies for defense, medical, and industrial applications. He is also an entrepreneurial leadership instructor at the University of Michigan Center for Entrepreneurship. And from 2013 to 2018, he served as a mentor in residence for the Tech Transfer Talent Network program supporting university startup teams statewide. Mr. Cucinelli served 16 years with the U.S. Coast Guard, where he focused on environmental protection and was named Coast Guard Hero in 2000, and thank you so much for doing that important work. Our fourth witness, who we heard a little bit about, is Dr. Johnny Park. Dr. Park is the Chief Executive Officer of Wabash Heartland Innovation Network, a consortium of 10 counties in north central Indiana devoted to developing the region into a global epicenter of digital agriculture and next generation manufacturing by using the Internet of Things. Prior to his position at this network, Dr. Park founded, scaled, and led a successful exit of an ag tech company, Spencer Technologies. He was previously a faculty member in the School of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Purdue University, where his research included projects on robotics, computer vision, machine learning, and distributed sensor networks. We will make note that not all SBIR funding goes through Michigan and Indiana, but we are very pleased to have these great witnesses here today. And there's one thing we know on this committee is that the Midwest is best. So as our witnesses should know, you're each going to have 5 minutes for your spoken testimony. And make sure to turn on your microphone when you're speaking. Your written testimony will be included in the record for the hearing. And then after you've each of you have completed your spoken testimony, we'll begin with questions, and each member will have 5 minutes to question the panel. And with that, we're going to start with Dr. Tilbury.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Baird, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the SBIR and STTR programs at the National Science Foundation. It's great to see a little Big Ten rivalry up there. So this year, as NSF celebrates its 70th anniversary, we reflect on the many breakthrough discoveries and innovations that have been enabled by NSF investments that sustain, accelerate, and transform America's globally preeminent research ecosystem. Some of the most well-known innovative companies of today, such as Qualcomm, started with NSF support, and specifically with support from SBIR and STTR. These programs are an integral part of the NSF strategy to stimulate innovation and address societal needs through the commercialization of the results of fundamental research. NSF is unique across the federal government, with a mission to support fundamental research across all fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM, and all levels of STEM education. Given this unique role in supporting innovators, the agency recognized early on the potential for greater and faster commercialization of NSF-funded research. That is why, in the late 1970s, NSF created the SBIR program. The primary objective of the SBIR and STTR programs is to transform scientific discoveries into products and services with commercial potential or societal benefits. Within NSF, most of our SBIR and STTR program officers are scientists and also former entrepreneurs, investors, or both. At NSF, SBIR research topics cover the entire spectrum of the marketplace and the nation. And I'll tell you a story about one of my colleagues from the University of Michigan, Dr. Shaurya Avtar. Shaurya started his career getting some early NSF funding for basic research into kinematics, which, if any of you are mechanical engineers, that's pretty old-fashioned mechanical engineering. However, he had an innovative idea about how to remap the surgeon's hand movements in a laparoscopic surgical instrument using purely kinematics. So when the surgeon moves his fingers this way, the end effector moves the same way instead of the opposite way, as you would expect. Now, current technology such as the Da Vinci robot can do this remapping, but it takes a whole room of electronics and costs $1 million. Shoria's mechanical device costs less than $500. So he went through I-Corps, one of NSF's programs, started a company, and got SBIR Phase 1 and Phase 2 awards. And his company is currently operating in Michigan with several dozen employees, producing these surgical devices as fast as they can. Now he's back at the university, has another basic research award, and possibly this cycle will start all over again. We'll wait and see. So NSF's I-Corps program provides training to potential entrepreneurs, faculty, graduate students, postdocs, teaching them about what the market needs are and how they might commercialize their product. PIs who have been through the I-Corps program are 3 to 4 times more likely to receive an NSF SBIR Phase 1 award than teams who hadn't gone through the I-Corps training. So building on this success, over the last year, we have put more than 1,000 NSF, SBIR, and STTR Phase 1 awardees through a condensed version of the I-Corps program called Beat the Odds Bootcamp. So in conclusion, I'll echo what we heard earlier. Small businesses create jobs, they fuel the economy, and they support communities. For over 40 years, NSF has helped startups and small businesses across the country transform their ideas into marketable products and services through our SBIR and STTR programs. NSF is constantly assessing its performance against the goals of these programs and has taken on new initiatives and new outreach and new enhancements. We know that it takes more than the SBIR and STTR investment to translate a technical vision into a realized economically viable company. But these SBIR and STTR programs anchor our extensive activity in identifying and leveraging the opportunities for new technologies. On behalf of the National Science Foundation and all of our awardees, I want to thank you for your support of NSF and for this opportunity to highlight the programs that provide startups and small businesses with the means to keep America on the forefront of innovation. Thank you.
So Chair Stevens, Ranking Member Baird, and members of the committee, thank you so much for inviting me to testify. And I am the co-chair of several ongoing National Academies assessments of the SBIR program. Our first assessment of the Department of Energy will be released at the end of March. So I'm not able to speak to any of the findings or recommendations of the committee. I'm appearing today in my capacity as an expert in innovation and as a scholar who has studied the SBIR program, its impacts, and also the ways in which those impacts may be broadened. And so this program is highly successful. It's copied around the world, and it deserves Congress's continued and enthusiastic support. The program strengthens the capacity for private sector innovation in the U.S. But there are opportunities. States have been experimenting with programs to encourage technology commercialization, but these state resources are not evenly distributed. And there's a tendency for the states that have a lot of activity to get more. And so an example, the way that we could level the playing field are increased funding for the Phase 0 proof of concept centers. And about half of the states currently have these programs with small amounts of money in the range of $2,000 to $10,000. They increase the competitiveness of the SBIR proposals. And this is very important for first-time applicants, but also when people have an unsuccessful application, they can then revise it. Another example is the SBIR state match, and these are for companies that have been awarded funding and it tops off the amount of the funding. And there are currently 15 states that offer a match that will increase the amount of funding. My own research with Lauren Lanahan has examined this program. We find that small amounts of money in the range of $25,000 to $50,000 increase the probability of a firm moving from a phase 1 to a phase 2. That suggests that increasing the amount of funding will increase the success of the program. Now, these state programs are copied on an ad hoc basis, and having them be a national program might increase the success of the program. Many states simply don't have the access to adopt these programs, and these are the states where there is the greatest need. The evidence suggests that the SBIR program is working well, but the SBIR program is only one component of a larger system of innovation. The program is called America's Seed Fund, and it is meant to address this colorfully named funding gap, the Valley of Death. But venture capital has not been moving in with follow-on funding. Many SBIR recipients are unable to secure the needed funding to move forward. And this is especially true for the high-risk, high-reward technologies that are essential in energy independence, providing new and better industrial materials, and really those technologies that have the potential to create new industries. Venture capital has increasingly been moving towards software investments, and this is where you have lower, shorter development times, lower capital cost, and less market uncertainty. The VC model is also predicated on returning monies to investors within 5 to 10 years, and that's not enough time to develop these technologies where there is such great uncertainty. I'd also like to suggest that these wonderful pilot programs you've been trying should be part of this landscape and should be institutionalized. And so this is a way of nesting the companies in a support organizations. The idea of public-private partnerships, which would blend funding, bringing together different users, will help validate discoveries and move business forward. NIH has tried this very successfully with their REACH program, that's Research, Evaluation, and Commercialization Hubs, but this could be extended to other agencies. And so I think that as we think of reforming the SBIR program, it's important to remember it works very well, and that we need to get other components of the system supporting SBIR in a better way. Thank you.
Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Baird, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me here today to offer an entrepreneur's perspective on HR 3774 and the overall SBIR STTR program. Apologies in advance for saying that acronym over and over again. Sorry. I offer my perspective through the unique lens of having professionally mentored or personally managed more than 15 technology ventures that have received approximately $8 million in seed funding from the SBIR STTR program over the last 12 years. This funding has spanned the NSF, NIH, DOE, NASA, and the DoD, and in many cases led to follow-on angel, venture capital, and strategic investments, and the commercialization of technologies that now meet important civilian and military needs and keep the U.S. at the forefront of global technological innovation. One great example is Intralaser, which launched out of the University of Michigan in 1997 and commercialized a blade-free laser technology used in LASIK eye surgery. The company received about $2.2 million in SBIR seed funding in the 1990s and was eventually acquired for over $800 million in 2007. More than 40 million people worldwide have benefited from this life-changing technology, including me and probably many people in this chamber. It has created high-tech jobs, economic growth, and contributed to our technological leadership. The inventor of this platform laser technology received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2018 and is now working on a way to use it to render nuclear waste harmless. These are truly remarkable economic and societal dividends for a $2.2 million seed investment by the U.S. government. More recent examples from the past decade include H3D, a 2013 spin-out from the University of Michigan with a novel radiation imaging technology, and SkySpecs, a company launched by Michigan grad students in 2012, which uses autonomous drones to conduct wind turbine inspections. Together, these companies have received a total of about $2.3 million in SBIR funding and have gone on to create over 85 high-tech jobs, reach in excess of $15 million in combined annual revenue, and deliver revolutionary technologies into the global energy industry. 70% of the U.S. nuclear power plant fleet now uses H3D radiation detectors, while SkySpecs has completed over 30,000 wind turbine inspections in 19 countries. Again, this is a remarkable return on a relatively small investment by the U.S. government. Some ongoing projects with which I'm involved include Inertia Microsystems, with NSF SBIR funding to develop a high-precision gyroscope that can enable autonomous vehicles to operate on inertial navigation alone for up to 15 minutes, and iReprogram, with DARPA STTR funding to develop a biocomputational platform for cellular reprogramming. Imagine having a simple skin biopsy and converting your own body's cells into personalized treatments for wound healing, obesity, diabetes, cancer, and even aging. My own company, Endectra, has received $1.3 million in SBIR and STTR funding from NSF and the DoD, resulting in a broad portfolio of sensor technologies for defense, medical, and industrial applications, including distributed radiation and gas detectors, biophotonic probes for cancer radiotherapy and real-time diabetes monitoring, and power meters for enterprise energy management. These and thousands of other high-potential companies are currently using SBIR and STTR funding to move federally funded research across the wide chasm that exists between laboratory and marketplace. But like Intralays, H3D, and SkySpecs, they will typically not succeed overnight, but rather require 7 to 10 years, exceptional dedication, and the patient bridge capital that the SBIR STTR program provides. I applaud this subcommittee's ongoing support of this program and its efforts to prioritize small manufacturers, cybersecurity, and diversity in HR 3774. I would also recommend that in future you prioritize small businesses developing low-carbon energy and climate mitigation technologies in order to address the existential threat of global warming. In closing, SBIR STTR-funded innovations have a long record of creating American jobs, improving our lives, and meeting strategic national needs. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's hearing and for your continued support of this important program. I'll be pleased to answer any questions you may have, and for the record, I was born in Fort Wayne.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about the SBIR and STTR program. I hope you'll find that my own experience provides compelling evidence of the value of this very important program. I was a professor at Purdue doing research in robotics, machine learning, and wireless sensor networks. In 2008, I received a grant from USDA to develop technologies that could automate labor-intensive activities in agriculture. I knew very little about agriculture back then, so this project served as an entry door for me to this very important industry. In that USDA project, my work focused on automating the process of monitoring insect populations. Traditionally, monitoring insect populations is done by deploying a large number of cardboard sticky traps in the field. Each week, workers have to go into the field, first find a trap, open it up, count the number of bugs that are caught in the trap, write the number down on a piece of paper, clean the trap up, hang it back up, and repeat that process for hundreds of traps deployed in the field. As you can imagine, this is very labor-intensive, but it's critically important because those trap numbers determine and inform when, where, and how much insecticide to apply. About a year of research and development at Purdue, we were able to demonstrate the feasibility of automatically monitoring insect populations with a wireless network of highly specialized sensors. Because of the potential for this technology to drastically improve the practice of pest management, I started a company, Spensa, to commercialize the research. But as with many technology startups that stem from university research, commercialization took much longer than anticipated. we have several problems to resolve in order to take our lab prototype into a full commercial product. The SBIR program helped us in two specific ways. First, it provided a necessary infusion of money to allow us to complete the research and development to the point where venture capital could participate. Second, the SBIR program taught me, through its very well-organized SBIR grantee workshops, how to navigate between the paradigms of scientific research and entrepreneurship. Both were critically important to an academic-turned-entrepreneur like myself. Spensa received approximately $1.5 million in SBIR grants from USDA and NSF. Spensa was named by Forbes as one of the top 25 most innovative agtech startups in 2017. Spensa created jobs, hiring over 70 technical and business professionals. Its products help growers reduce the labor costs associated with pest management and help them make more informed and timely, judicious spray decisions. On average, Spensa doubled its annual revenue in each of the last 5 years before it was acquired by DTN, which continues to operate the business from the Purdue Research Park where Spensa was founded. But well beyond its impact on Spensa was SBIR's impact on me. The program taught me to understand entrepreneurship as a customer-centered engine for innovation that accelerates change through the strategic, value-sensitive, and nimble deployment of resources. And resources includes not only financial capital and intellectual property, but also the team's talents, time, and passion. The entrepreneurship model is thus a resource engine. As each new asset comes to fruition, it becomes the basis for the new deployment and generation of value, ultimately helping others in need and making their lives better. As I mentioned earlier, Spensa was ultimately acquired, but my current role as CEO of the Wabash Heartland Innovation Network, or WIN, is an even greater and truly unique opportunity to put research and entrepreneurship together to meet the needs of rural America. With very generous funding from the Lilly Endowment, WIN was created by the 10-county rural region of Indiana with the goal of enabling the region to leverage its many assets, especially Purdue University, Ivy Tech Community College, and strong manufacturing and agricultural sectors to improve the region's economic prospects. WIN is a nonprofit organization with a very ambitious goal, and I am leading this organization like a startup. I believe WIN is benefiting tremendously from lessons learned from Spensa. I believe its story illustrates how the SBIR program, in action with Spensa, continues to generate economic growth. In the long run, WIN envisions the Wabash Heartland as the global epicenter of digital ag and next-generation manufacturing powered by IoT technology. That is quite a return for $1.5 million in SBIR grant funding to a little startup in West Lafayette, Indiana. I hope this gives you an idea of both the short and the long-term impact of the SBIR program. I hope you will continue to give it your full support. Thank you.
And with that, we're going to begin with our first round of 5-minute questions, and the chair is going to recognize herself at this time. Thank you again for the very informative testimony. A lot to unpack here, and I think where I'd like to start is kind of where we left off on the commercialization and the flexibility component of things. Obviously, we're always in such a rush, commercialize, but we also need a little bit of flexibility and some time with that. We need to recognize not everything is going to have the same turnaround for commercialization. In fact, Dr. Park, I almost believe I can guarantee you that I was at a Venture Connectors presentation in Louisville, Kentucky, where I heard about your company in 2014 and thought, wow, what a neat idea, and fascinating 6 years on to see what Spensa's been able to achieve and do. But if you don't mind, just Mr. Cucinelli and Dr. Park, just talking a little bit more about the flexibility, particularly even at the beginning stages when you're, processing the award, getting the dollars, working with the agency, and then also maybe some thoughts that you might have around allowing the agencies to implement more flexible award structures to make them more compatible with the pace of innovation, if you don't mind shedding light on it, and I'll let you two duke it out for who goes first. Yeah.
I'll get started. Yes, so again, I'm a first-time entrepreneur, and SBIR program was something that I was not very familiar with. But as any businesses, as we embark on commercializing a research project to a commercial market, you are embarked with very different scenarios, something that you had not anticipated. And because I believe SBIR programs and program managers stem from kind of research-related projects, they understand the uncertainty of the path that we're on. So I was very appreciative of our program manager at NSF being very flexible and understanding of our need for pivoting even during the project. For instance, we had, in our proposal, was to develop a certain type of sensor that we believe would solve a certain issue that we had in mind. But in about 2-3 months into the project, we quickly realized that the sensor type was not viable commercially. And so we requested to the program manager that we think we need to change the type of sensor that we need to research on. And the program manager was very, very flexible on allowing us to do that, because he saw ultimately this type of flexibility and pivoting was a critical piece of making sure that research moves on and successful commercialization path.
Yeah, great.
So I have two observations. One is that I really like the idea in the legislation of the second phase 2, the follow-on funding. So the idea that the government can double down, so to speak, on the investments that are going pretty well but need a little more push into the private sector. I think from what you've heard about these different companies that have succeeded, you can tell that there's a significant return on investment here. And I think especially with what I call the hard tech, physical science-based companies that have a really big chasm to cross, a big valley of death, they can really be helped by that second phase 2 when it's appropriate. It has to be vetted properly. My second observation is it would be really helpful if the agencies that award SBIRs and STTRs by contract, as opposed to as a grant, push more of their funding up front so that the money isn't tranched in small drips and drabs along the way. So for example, with the $150,000, I'm not to pick on DOD, but with a DOD contract, you're going to get $30,000 every 2 months along the way, and then a final project payment, as opposed to an NSF grant where you're going to get $150,000 now, $225,000 right up front. If you're talking about a brand new company that's trying to jump out of the lab and into the private sector, that DOD contract is very difficult to manage because you don't have any working capital yet. Whereas the NSF is giving you that money right up front. So if there was a way to encourage the contracting agencies to just move some of that funding earlier, I think it would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, as needed. Okay, I'm going to cede my time to the next questioner, but we are going to do another round of questions. So with that, I'm going to recognize Dr. Baird, and then we'll go through everyone that's here, and then we'll start again.
Well, I'm going to continue on, Dr. Cucinelli, and have Dr. Park give his impression of, you started with an SBI award from USDA, and then you went to one from NSF. So can you share your experiences in those two programs and how effective or efficient they were to work with?
Right. So USDA SBIR, we only received phase 1, and then we received NSF phase 1, 2, and 2B. We did apply for USA phase 2, but we did not get it. So I have a lot more experience with NSF than USDA. But both cases, we were awarded the full amount up front, at least for phase 1, but phase 2 was tranched. But I think it was very helpful for us to get, again, I agree that as a startup, you need a working capital. And this is already a very competitive process, and this has been vetted for, maybe 10, 20% of the applications only get phase one. So I think having that, going through the vetting process, at least in phase one, my recommendation is also to have all that money put in upfront. I would also say that NSF has the grantee workshops. Every time I attend the workshops, I am so energized and inspired, and I learn so much because, again, the business formation, venture capital raising, and there's something that you don't really learn much, but having the experience of like-minded entrepreneurs and experienced VCs as a speaker and learn from them firsthand, for me was extremely valuable as a first-time entrepreneur.
Thank you. My next question, I'm going to start, Dr. Tilbury. What steps does NSF take to measure the success of its two programs, SBIR?
So we do a lot of assessment of all of our programs at NSF. We certainly survey the awardees and get their feedback on what they're doing. And we've made quite a lot of changes in the last few years. In fact, a couple of years ago, we changed the program so people could submit a pitch before they had to register with the federal government and fill out 37 forms before they could write a 15-page proposal and hear that their project wasn't appropriate for NSF. So we try to streamline based on the assessment that we had and the feedback from the PIs. And we, take data. So there's some data in my written testimony, but a new number that I got this morning was that if you look at awards we've made since 2014, there's been more than $9 billion in subsequent funding that these companies have received from venture capital or other awards. And more than 100 of those companies have been acquired, which is often a goal, as Johnny Park talked about with his company. You have more specific questions, or?
No, I think that's good. Dr. Feldman, would you continue that on, what you look for, what criteria you use to measure the success?
The success of the program, I think, extends way beyond just the individual companies. And so the SBIR program at universities has really helped to change the culture and to put more emphasis on commercializing academic discoveries. And so that has been very positive. We also know that through the program, agencies are able to source great ideas from small companies, and those companies will have ideas that have escaped larger corporations. And we have some evidence that this induces other people to look at those topics, so that fundamental discoveries that result from SBIR projects actually help to seed scientific fields that result in translational additional follow-on work. And so that is sort of an indirect effect. There are lots of effects in creating follow-on products, generating patents, but the generation of fundamental knowledge really helps to keep America competitive.
Thank you, and I'm out of time. Mr. Cucinelli, your answer to the previous question is going to have to count as my question to you. So thank you, and I yield back.
Great. And with that, the chair would like to recognize Congressman Tonko for 5 minutes of questioning.
The member would like to acknowledge your recognition. Thank you, Chair. America's, and welcome to our witnesses, America's SBIR and STTR programs support our nation's most forward-thinking entrepreneurs and innovators. The Small Business Innovation Research and Technology Transfer programs have proven to be among the most successful federal programs for driving technological innovation in U.S. history. Combined, they have delivered more than 70,000 patents, including extraordinary innovations in agriculture, defense, energy, health sciences, homeland security, space, transportation, and other fields. Phase 1 and Phase 2 SBIR awards have made it possible for countless jobs to be created in my district in the capital region of New York. Thanks to these and other similar programs, our region has built itself into a boom in high technology innovation and economic development. Among our many success stories, 4 stand out from our capital region. The first is Kitware, a company based in Clifton Park, New York. Kitware's first round of funding came from the SBIR program in 1998 when they received a Phase 1 award from the Air Force to develop technology related to the visualization of uncertainty in data. While this effort did not progress to Phase 2, they were able to attract additional customers with the developed technology to fuel their early growth. Since then, they've relied upon SBIR STTR program to develop advanced technology that improves lives, grows businesses, and meets the critical needs of the federal government. Kitware's story is inspiring, but in many ways it is also entirely typical of SBIR companies. New York's capital region is also home to another SBIR success story, that being Automated Dynamics, which credits their existing technology to the SBIR program. In fact, Automatic Dynamics was one of the original inventors of 3D printing in the 1980s with the help of a National Science Foundation SBIR grant. This is now an $8 billion a year industry that is expected to grow 30% this year. Automated Dynamics also helped to develop its core technology, namely additive manufacturing of advanced composite structures, through Army and Navy SBIR awards. They remain the world leader in this technology, and while they have managed to outgrow the SBIR program, as they are no longer a small business, they continue to credit the program as a springboard for their success. Speaking of grateful SBIR winners, International Electronic Machines, IEM, a small company located currently in Troy, New York, has said they, quote, and I quote, have had the great privilege and honor of participating multiple times in the SBIR program. SBIR contacts that IEM has won have helped support the company over the 3 decades that IEM has been in business, and have resulted in more than 50 patents both here and overseas. Some of the products that have resulted from their SBIR work have generated millions of dollars in revenue over the years, supporting the success of the business and their employees, consultants, vendors, and broader community. Last but not least, Innovative Technology, Inc., or MITI for short, has been in business in the Capital District for 25 years and is a previous recipient of the prestigious SBIR Tibbetts Award. They shared how they believe that they and the Capital District Tech Valley have benefited greatly from the SBIR STTR program by making it possible to keep engineers and scientists locally, but also to attract and retain high-caliber international technologists and researchers. These extraordinary successes demonstrate to me clearly that research funding has a powerful economic return, and we need to continue to fight to ensure these agencies have the funding they need and in turn ensure productive funding levels for the SBIR STTR programs. To me, the reinvestment in the community from SBIR and STTR is absolutely amazing. It's keeping talent at work. It's providing for additional people to claim my district as their now home front, and is unleashing untold amounts of progress and success that obviously percolates into the greater society, so that we are all benefited by it. So wanted to share those on the record in the 5 minutes that was allotted, but I think it's important to document the real-life outcomes in our given congressional districts, and for that, we thank you. I yield back.
With that, the chair's going to recognize Mr. Balderson for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, panel, for being here. And this first question that I'm going to ask is I can direct it to the whole panel, and Dr. Tilbury, you could answer. You could start from there, and we'll go down along. But thank you all again for being here. And when I'm talking to small business owners in Central Ohio, I often hear about the most important things that Congress and the administration can do to help small businesses grow and create new jobs. It's to reduce taxes on businesses, make the tax code simpler, and clear away unnecessary and excessive government regulations. And the small businesses you work with, what barriers to success do you see?
So at NSF, we fund the small businesses to try to take the technological risk out of their ideas. So these are the high-tech companies, and this is the stage before venture capital has an appetite to come in. So most of the funds the companies that we fund, in fact, 92% of them have fewer than 10 employees, and 77% are less than 5 years old. So these are really young, really small companies with really high-tech ideas, and they need this SBIR or STTR funding to get over that technological risk.
So as I'm sitting on a panel with people from Michigan and Indiana, let me reveal that I'm from Ohio, and I'm a Midwesterner who had to go south.
Thank
for
you very
work.
much. I will ask my staff why they didn't tell me that.
Oh, sorry, and it's probably somewhere on a very deep resume. But let me mention, for these innovative small firms, taxes are not the problem because they're not profitable yet. Really what they require is more in terms of resources and support. I think that, it is encouraging to hear the importance of training things with the I-Corps program. So really smart scientists who are then suddenly confronted with starting a business. That's a completely different set of skills. So providing that type of expertise is costly. I'm a great believer in the state technology economic development programs. And, that again provides incredible resources to small companies.
So again, to comment on the taxes issue, boots on the ground perspective, I don't pay any taxes because I spend every single penny of my SBIR funding as fast as I get it. I spend it every year. I work with my accountant to make sure that I don't pay taxes until I become profitable. So that's how I manage that. I get really frustrated when people talk about small business and they're talking about the sort of Main Street bricks and mortar small business, whereas I'm doing scalable tech startup business. They're very different in terms of their needs. And that's an example where that dialogue can go sideways. But it sounds like you've got a great handle on that. Second point is to build on something Dr. Feldman said, but from a different perspective. The idea that the SBIR program can provide cultural benefits in the universities. As a mentor in residence or an entrepreneur in residence, what I've seen is I can use the SBIR program as a way to help influence that culture shift when I'm coaching a senior faculty member. If I'm working with someone who has built a laboratory over the course of 20 years and knows how to manage graduate students, PhDs, postdocs, they don't know how to run a small business yet. And I can use the SBIR program to have a framework to help them begin to adopt the right mindsets.
I would concur. Tax was not at all an issue for us throughout the course of Spencer. I would say, yes, I think the impact that the small business or tech startups has in the economy is great, but I would also like to emphasize its impact on people, the entrepreneurs, the researchers and scientists who may not have gone to entrepreneurship if it wasn't for SBIR, like myself, right? I was an academic, but SBIR really opened an opportunity for me to get into starting a startup, which led to now leading something that I had never imagined that I could do. So I would really consider and encourage you to think about not just the company's impact on the economy, how about all the people that have been touched by SBIR? What's their second career, third career looks like? How have they really changed the way they lead, the way they run businesses because of the impact of SBIR?
Thank you all very much. I yield back.
The chair would like to recognize Mr. Gonzalez for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our panel. Dr. Feldman, I too am from Ohio, went to Ohio State. Mr. Cucinelli, you will see that in this committee, not only are we bipartisan, but we can actually work across enemy lines geographically as well. This is a fantastic committee in that regard. As many folks here would know, I'm somebody who wants to make sure that we are properly funding our research enterprise, that we're supporting entrepreneurs, in particular in fast-growing industries. And so as a general premise, somebody who'd be very supportive of SBIR and STTR, I do have some questions around how we're measuring success. And I want to start with Dr. Tilbury. So you kind of highlighted some brief data points at the end, but I'd love to hear kind of any numbers you have or any barriers to acquiring these numbers around percent of companies that receive follow-on private investment, dollars raised, percent still operating versus acquired, employment numbers, geographical split. I'm trying to figure out kind of how we're tracking from funding to viable company.
So I might defer that to Dr. Feldman, but
Okay.
I will say we are trying to track all of those numbers, and we have data on people who get the phase 2B, which is a matching. If
Right.
you're in a phase 2 and you get external input, then NSF will match that up to a certain amount. So that number we absolutely know because we gave them matching.
Right.
But as was also mentioned earlier, some of these companies, the phase 2 is a couple of years, and it might take many more years until they're commercially viable or they're acquired. And so during that lag time, I think we are absolutely interested in acquiring that data, and that's why we work with the national academies. And you may not be able to say yet, but
Yes, and so I am co-chairing the National Academy's assessment of the SBIR program.
Okay.
And I'm not able to really talk about our findings yet, and I'm happy to come back. Our report on the Department of Energy will be released in March.
Okay.
But, this is an important question because we have a need for government investment because these technologies are so early stage and
Yeah,
so risky.
absolutely.
And so it's very complicated, and this is where we're now able, with new digital technologies, scraping the web, to sort of be able to follow this sort of initial receipt of a grant to companies.
Right.
Sometimes when companies fail, that might be appropriate, right?
Yeah,
Because the technology,
happens.
right, wasn't going anywhere. And then I think the entrepreneur, the entrepreneurial team, other people in the company will then be recycled and do other things in a local economy.
And then if I could step in for a second, Dr. Tilbury, the average grant size is what? So you talked about there's some who are kind of operating for years before they receive the follow-on funding. I ran a venture-backed company at one point. We didn't have years, right? You're usually doing it in 18-month increments.
so I believe so it's not an average. So the phase 1, if you get it from NSF, is 225,000.
Okay.
All in one shot.
And that'll be
then phase
2 to 3
2
employees.
has been increased now to 750,000, and then they can get matching on top of that, and
Got
there's
it.
supplements on top of that. So there's a lot of, even though that's the base number, there's a lot of extra supplements opportunities.
Okay, and then with my last minute, Dr. Feldman, so without getting into specifics of your report and what you're going to release, what are the barriers, the key barriers that you're seeing to acquiring the data that I outlined that I think would be helpful in terms of collecting it?
Well, and so ideally, we would like to know who is applying to the program, right? And then not only, we now know through the SBA who was awarded funding, but if we could follow those who applied and didn't get funding, or did they come back, that's capturing another kind of learning. So that would be very valuable. It would also be much easier for us if we could access some of the census data centers and the data that is behind that sort of security wall.
Great, thank you. Yeah, sure, Mr. Cucinelli.
I don't have this in front of me, I apologize, but in preparing my written testimony, I found an Air Force report from, I believe, 2014 that is worth taking a look at. I'll follow up with your staff if you'd like.
That'd
But
be great.
it did this across hundreds and hundreds of SBIR awards and came up with metrics.
Thank you. And as I said at the beginning, I want to be helpful. I want to empower you guys, but we need some data so we can just measure how we're doing. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. We're going to do one more round of questions. It might just be Dr. Baird and myself, but we got a lot to chew on here. I wanted to go back to the geographic diversity component that you brought up, Dr. Feldman. you talked about the pockets of prosperity in university towns, and then you also talked about how the system with SBIR and STTR funding works well in some places, but not everywhere. And I know the other part of what you do is the research on the geography of innovation. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how we can better democratize innovation, especially through the SBIR program, so that towns all throughout this country can participate in our innovation economy. And if you have any thoughts, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you. And so, you know, as we study this, we do see these pockets of prosperity, mainly in college towns where the SBIR program is working well. But one of the problems when we rely on venture capital funding, when you take money from outside and, you know, you're not going to be able to stay in many cases. So companies will relocate. And also, given that the venture capital model is predicated on a 5 to 7 year return, what that means is that there will be an exit. And with that exit, it's very likely that you would have the company relocating as it was acquired. And so it doesn't really keep the company local and grow to employment. And I think one of the things about the Phase 2B additional funding helps tips bring that along. Also having more proof of concept centers. But you know, as we talk about these companies, SBIR is not really meant to be a jobs program. It is an innovation program, but we need something else in place to give us the jobs that we need in many parts of the country to spread that prosperity more widely.
Right, and it's you know, spanning 11 agencies for SBIR, 5 for STTR funding, and you sort of wonder, you know, does it help to have regions as designated, self-designated areas, for instance? I know the Economic Development Administration has looked at this. Obviously, that might get overly prescriptive and too quick. It could get overly prescriptive too quickly. However, you know, when we're looking at how do we make sure that we're spreading the peanut butter throughout all of these great towns and communities and into the hands of innovators. I mean, part of why we are having this hearing and having this go into the congressional record is that we want America to hear this. We want people to know that this is available, and whether you're at one of the big universities or not, that these 11 agencies, right, are coordinated in this way and in their own research areas. And this is a small point, but I just wanted to ask about it, which is the administrative fee that Congress has authorized with these pilot programs. You know, it's allowing agencies to use the 3% of their SBIR funds for new activities, such as outreach and commercialization and oversight and administration of the program. And this is known as the administrative fee pilot. There was a 2016 GAO report that found 7 of the 11 SBIR agencies spent $19.1 million of these funds. This is going back to fiscal year 2014. And Dr. Tilbury or Dr. Feldman, do you have you know, any examples of this that you could elaborate on for us, particularly how agencies are tracking the outcomes of these efforts? I know this is a little bit of what Congressman Gonzalez was talking about, but question about, should we be is this one of the pilot programs we should be expanding? Is this helpful?
So absolutely, it's a helpful program. I can tell you that we use some of those administrative fees to send our program directors on outreach trips to underserved geographic areas, underserved communities. We have a joint program right now with GEM, the Graduate Education for Minorities.
Yeah.
We use some of those funds for the Beat the Odds boot camp that we put the SBIR Phase 1 people through. We sponsor trade shows that provide commercialization opportunities for grantees. We use that to launch this project pitch that I told you about, which allows people to come in at any time with a brief pitch about their idea and see if it's appropriate for NSF. So, and to fund this National Academy study about the impact of the SBIR program. So those are the kinds of things that we do with the administrative fee that are not directly to small business, but absolutely supporting the program.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much. All right. I'm out of time.
Thank you. You know, I'm a veteran, so I'm kind of partial to veterans, and so, in fact, I think we've got a bill that'll be signed, hopefully, next week or so, that encourages an increased outreach for veterans in the STEM program. So, Dr. Tilbury, I guess you mentioned in your testimony that there's a veterans research supplement that attracts veterans into the STEM enterprise. Would you care to elaborate on that a little?
So we have a lot of programs to attract veterans into the research enterprise, research experience for veterans, and I believe they can work with a small business through an SBIR. So the small business would get a supplement to bring in a veteran to help them in their activities. I know we certainly do that for all the basic research awards that we offer.
Any others that want to comment about that regarding veterans?
Regarding veterans, what we see is disproportionately veterans come from rural areas in the South and West, and they're more sort of geographically isolated. People would like to return to their small towns, but there are not necessarily opportunities for them. And veterans make great entrepreneurs, right? They're just disciplined and they know how to work together. So I think this is an area where we could have more fruitful engagement.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I completely agree. I have a number of friends who are currently running small businesses, started from scratch, and the skill sets required to do that are a perfect overlap with what many people experience in the military, both in terms of their training and their experience, the creativity under fire, so to speak, the discipline, the dedication that it takes to see something through for 7 to 10 years. So pulling more veterans in is going to be invaluable in increasing the success of the program.
I would just mention in relation to rural communities, there are, the Midwest region has traditionally been kind of labeled as there's not enough capital, but investors are waking up and there's increasingly more investors are targeting Midwestern companies, including rural communities. So I think, to me, SBIR is a form of investment from the government. And so if venture capital is waking up to invest more, I think there is a case to be made for SBIR program to consider geographically diverse investments to support rural communities.
Well, what I just heard was good news, because most of those veterans, if they've been deployed or been in the service for a period of time, they probably just want to go home. And a lot of those you just mentioned from rural areas. So
right.
That's good news. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now the chair will recognize the gentleman from the great state of New York again for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The many hearings that we've had recently have spoken to the need for us to maintain a very strong competitive edge, especially when it comes to critical technologies. So my question to any and all of our witnesses is, what role do you believe the SBIR and STTR programs can play in the United States innovation policy and in helping our nation maintain science and technology leadership in what is that increasingly competitive world?
So I believe the SBIR program is a critical component of that increasing competitiveness, because it allows the results of basic fundamental research, which is primarily funded by the federal government, to make the transition into commercialization. And as we've heard, it can be a long and slow road to commercialization, and it takes not only investment, but also patience and passion, perseverance. And so I think the SBIR program helps that transition into the current industries that we have to strengthen them, as well as create new industries that we haven't imagined yet.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I had the privilege of being involved in a fuel cell startup between 2009 to 2011 in Europe, and it was very, very difficult to get the initial seed capital. I saw just a fundamental difference between here and there, And we talked constantly. Some of the people who had been on this side of the pond would lament with me in the pub at lunch about how, I wish we had the SBIR STTR program to get us to the venture capital. And we eventually raised about, I think, 3.2 million euros or something like that. But it was incredibly difficult. So I think our system here works much, much better to get these early stage companies out of the gate and get us to a position where we might eventually be able to double down on some of this innovation and maintain that leadership.
Right. Yes, Dr. Feldman.
I think also it's important to remember that this program is just part of our larger innovation system, and we really need to make sure that basic research is going on, these sort of fundamental discoveries, the serendipitous inquiry that will, sort of provide the seed corn for moving things forward. And we don't get too far out of balance by focusing on things that are immediately commercializable and more short range.
Well, there are some of those, some fiscally conservative think tanks that monitor action on the Hill that would advocate that there be no federal dollars shared with research, that they don't believe it's appropriate. What would your response to that be?
That they are wrong. And that would be an awfully fun debate to engage in, because I think it's critically important. And so in the U.S. for a long time, we have issued the idea of industrial policy, yet we see that in Asia there is a lot of industrial policy and a lot of targeted investment. And I think this is the wrong time for us to be questioning government's role.
Yes, and Dr. Tilbury?
I was going to say, we talked about the commercialization, but we've also, so NSF is celebrating its 70th anniversary this week, and he mentioned the LASIK eye surgery. Now, that came out of fundamental research in lasers. They weren't trying to build eye surgery when they did that fundamental basic research. They were trying to understand high energy physics. And so I think we need to continue to fund that fundamental basic research that you're not sure where it's going to lead, because it might lead someplace really interesting.
Right. And yes, sir.
So I'm currently
Cucinelli.
teaching a course in entrepreneurial leadership to graduate students, PhDs, MBAs, and they asked me the other day, well, where do we get our ideas from? And I said, well, you find a pain point and you think about it and you live it and then you go and fix it. But you can also go and look to the labs, look around, look to your engineering colleagues who are taking courses in aeronautics or whatever, and you'll find innovation there. That's the basic research, and it's being looked for by these bright young innovators who are going to see the idea that maps over to the pain point they've identified, and then go find the professor and his or her lab team and make a company out of it and make it go. And they'll use SBIR STTR to do that. But they can't do it if they don't have the basic research in place.
Thank you. So I'm hearing with sound rationale, you would reject the advice of those who suggest the federal government not apply any dollars toward research. Thank you so much. That's encouraging. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Tonko. We didn't invite them to the hearing, so and a big thank you to our witnesses. We're so proud of the NSF and your leadership as one of the 11 SBIR agencies, and what I think we kept hearing today, which is that you're such an example and a leader of how to do this right. And thank you, Dr. Tilbury, for your leadership, and Dr. Feldman for not only your leadership at the academies at this time, but also for your great research contributions, something that I know is very important to the economic development conversation as well. well as how states look to do that technology-based economic development strategies. And so we work very closely with our state partners as well. And then obviously a treat to have you here, Mr. Cucinelli from Michigan. And, thanks for your fabulous leadership, not only as an entrepreneur, but also as an educator. And that's the other piece of it. And Dr. Park, just wonderful to hear not only about your business success, but what you're also doing with WIN and the network that I think is going to have some tremendous effects. We like to say this. Well, I'll say this: that this was all Dr. Baird's idea. Okay, the legislation, the hearing, and it's the best in business here on the Science Committee, which is that we talk about the things that bring people together. And this is what the country wants to see. This is part of the doing and delivering agenda for our country. And we are looking forward to having you back when we get this legislation marked up, passed, and signed into law, and continuing to see the growth of SBIR and the lives that are changed and influenced. And yes, as an innovation program, because that is what America does really well. Our plight of innovation in the post 9/11 era, in particular over these last 20 years. We were the ones who proliferated the internet, propagated the iPhone, mobile apps, just to name one segment of our innovation economy that's really quite tangible to all. So thank you again. The record's going to remain open for 2 weeks for additional statements from members and for any additional questions that the committee members may have of our witnesses. And at this time, our witnesses are excused and the hearing is adjourned.
You did good with that gavel.
I'm on the gavel. I go home and brag. I'm like,
Good job.
And it's true. It was.